Hey guys, StarCraft here. Decided to take a day off yesterday just to get things cleared up. And still not doing my Jeff Loeb discussion because this one I know exactly what I'm going to talk about completely. And I'm doing the second place winner to my first poll for my story. Sorry, you'll hear the dogs in the background, sorry. Anyway, my first poll for my story spotlight. Why? Because when I initially did, it was coming down to the wire, it was down to two of them, so I decided to make the two thumbnails thinking it was going to be a tie. It wasn't, so I ended up doing the Transformers G.I. Joe. This one, though, I really want to talk about because it's one of my favorite Elseworlds. I love Elseworlds. I adore Elseworlds. Elseworlds, it showed you that in my comic book, in my comic book showcase, where I showed off my collection showcase, and basically, I have almost every single one of them. There's a few I'm missing, and be right back. Sorry about that, but as I was saying, this one is one of my favorite Elseworlds. I'm talking about the Superman Batman Generation Saga. Why do I call it Saga, not a trilogy? Because there's one book in it that we're going to talk with first that ties into it by the end. Even though it's never referenced again, at the very end of it, it does tie into it. And that would be Batman Captain America. And yes, by the way, this is also all done by John Byrne. And Byrne, he's been in the industry for so long, and he can be both an incredible person, but also a very divisive person. And how do I mean by divisive? Well, let's just say that one of my omnibus over there has his West Coast Avengers, and the whole point of his time there was to undo everything Steve Englehart did. And he's also notorious for also just coming in, just taking over, knocking stuff over just because it doesn't match what he wants to see. Sometimes it works, other times you get what happened with Donna Troy during his Wonder Woman tenure, among other things. But when left to his own devices, Byrne can be an incredible force, so long as someone's able to keep him a little bit on a leash. But in the case of this case, he is at his absolute best. What is this? Well, it's an Elseworlds, obviously, because it's set during World War II. And basically you have Captain America and Batman dealing with the Nazis. And you have Batman, for example, having a nice moment where he's meeting up with the losers, with, Sergeant Rocket and his commandos. I love that. That's pretty awesome. And then you have a point where Batman helps Cap as they are dealing with, and they're fighting alongside each other. Again, just Batman fighting in the war. You didn't see that often. And then at one point, Cap is sent to keep an eye on Bruce Wayne, and he does so as Steve Rogers. Why is he sent to keep an eye on him? Because things are pointing at him that he's working with the Nazis. We know he's not, but that's what everything's pointing towards. And then that eventually leads to the two of them fighting as Bruce and Batman, and Bruce and Steve. And then they realize who each other are because of their fighting styles, and they decide, as he said, if it was a snake, it would have bitten me. It would have bit me. And they decide then to, team up. And then we find out that the Joker is working with someone. We don't know who, but at first, but we then find out it's the Red Skull. And then we see everyone starts laughing as they're as they're starting to take out using the Joker's gas to take out a bunch of soldiers. Kind of clever. And then we have Captain America meeting up with Gordon. I like that. And we have Batman working with Bucky. Which again, Cap is with Robin, switching up their sidekicks, very clever. And then we see Red Skull gets a hold of Batman, mocking him a little bit. They're waiting them to explode. Obviously, things are going to be alright. But I do love how when the Joker meets the Red Skull, this is their first time meeting, Joker's not happy. Like, at all. Like, he says, "You're a bit late for Halloween." But he's like, "What? You mean that's not just the greatest guys? I've been working with a Nazi?" But of course, why are you so upset, Joker? From what I've read of your exploit, it seems obvious you would make a superb Nazi. That mask must be cutting off the oxygen to your brain. I may be a lunatic, but I'm an American lunatic. That is considered one of the Joker's best moments. And even he looks at Nazis as evil, that more evil than him. But then I love it and how they both use their respective, his fear gas and the dust that the Red Skull uses. And because they're both immune to their own stuff and their gases are so similar, they're both immune. So Red Skull knocks out Joker, because Joker's going to be a bit of a pain. Then they all meet up in an interesting version of the Bat plane as they're trying to stop a nuke from going off. That's what they got. The Nazis stole a nuke. Fat Boy. They stole the Fat Boy nuke. And basically Batman and Cap continue fighting. Joker decides he's going to actually help out and take him out. The two then fall as the but they even think they're not dead, and the nuke goes off. Then we cut to they head off. As we cut to many years later, as Dick Grayson and Batman and Bruce Jr., Batman and Robin at this point, are the ones who find Captain America all frozen. And yeah, it basically ends here. And if it says that Roger Stern gave him the idea of all this, and yeah, it ends with Batman and being the one to rescue Captain America instead of the Avengers, because there's no setup for Avengers. And again, this does tie into what we would see because it has this version of the characters. But for what this was as a done-in-one, it's just a nice, sweet, having the two fight off against Nazis in World War II. I like it. But that's just the primer. Let's get into the real event. What is Superman Batman Generations? The big thing that Byrne basically decided to ask is, what if, and the big Elseworld question, what if everyone aged in real time? What if everything just progressed forward, and from 1939, the year when Batman arrives, or a year after Superman did, and what if just everyone just kept on aging? We would jump in 10-year increments in the first one, and then 11 years starting from 1942 in this one. Then in this one we would have century skips. We'll get to how that can work out. But the other thing I like that Byrne does is he works with any type of aspects of continuity. For example, whenever we see Superman in the early days, he's not flying, he's leaping until the era when he's able to fly. But when he goes back to Superboy can fly around wherever he wants. Why? Because that's how it played out back then. Superboy was able to fly around despite the fact that it was set before Superman was learning how to fly. But he kept that consistent. Or because there was originally Jarvis Pennyworth, Bruce's original butler, before it became Alfred. So he decided, anytime, even when there was a flashback, which is the only time we ever saw Bruce Wayne back in the day, the flashback would eventually always be Alfred, because that's what things were retconned. It was a retcon as a flashback. But the one time in this one, Generation 3, where we actually had it set in the past, it was Jarvis. It's going to make your head explode like, wait, but how does that make sense? But that was the intent. He played it up like that. Even though we see in a flashback in this story set to before the Waynes die, and we see Alfred there, and yet we see Jarvis here, in his own way, it makes some sense. But let's dive right in. We open up with Batman, in the very first story set in 1939, deals with Batman and Superman meeting for the first time as they stop the Ultra Humanite. Who is the Ultra Humanite? Well, most people know him as being in a giant gorilla body, but he was the mad scientist for Superman before Lex Luthor. He was also an old balding guy, but eventually people gave up on the Ultra Humanite, changed him into the ape or a woman or whatever, because he's always known for putting his brains into other people's heads and bodies. And Lex ends up taking over as the mad scientist. But at the end of it all, there's a big explosion going off. Everyone's believed dead. And we're told that there was one goon named L, and that a red wig is floating around. Again, very interesting, and Byrne tries to go with a close and emulated style, a bit closer to the old issues of Siegel and Schuster and Bob Kane's era. Then we jump to 1949. By this point, obviously, 10 years have passed. Superman has married to Lois, and she's pregnant with their first child. Hey, it's 10 years. A lot can happen in 10 years. And I love it how he's basically like, Like, and Joker's kidnapped her. It's like, your husband, Mrs. Kent, or would you prefer Mrs. Superman? Oh, not that again. You're behind the times, Joker. No one in Metropolis has thought Clark was Superman since the day we got married. And then Superman shows up, but then he's exposed to kryptonite until it's revealed that it wasn't kryptonite, and it wasn't Superman because he seems immune to the kryptonite until Lex shows up and shoots him, reveals it's Batman in disguise. Playing up on that old thing. And yeah, then we continue forward as we're also introduced to Dick Grayson, ready to become Batman soon, but not yet. And he was ready to go out and go to college, but he decided, nope, let's have one last outing with Batman and Robin. And then there's everything leading up to this point, prior to everything. And then basically we see that we're told at one point that the Joker was found during World War II, hinting off to the Captain America Batman thing, but never directly referencing it. But we see that, yeah, Batman and Robin and Superman and Robin are looking down as Batman's been taken care of. And basically all this cryptic stuff that Lex is making. And until eventually until he's ready to tell Superman, okay, if you want it, you gotta expose yourself to the gold kryptonite, etc., etc. He's ready to have him do that until Heat Vision blasts it, but it wasn't from the Superman they were talking to. And that was Robin in disguise, playing up how he's at that age now where he can do the whole Superman trick. And basically, Batman gets up. He wasn't dead, as he takes out Joker, and then they abduct Lex. He grabs his kryptonite with the Joker, gets into a ship, but they're able to seal it and stop it all as they all get out of there before the explosion goes off. But then, and it turns out, why did Superman and Batman not get killed by the bullet? Turns out he used the heat vision. Superman used the heat vision on the bullet and then used a super breath to knock him out. Again, using that old Silver Agey logic. But we also find out at the very end that prior to everything, Lex at some point exposed Lois to gold kryptonite, which in this point permanently removes a kryptonite of their powers. So their unborn son is now forever going to be normal. They choose not to tell him initially about it all. I mean, it's for the best. And at the end, then we're introduced to Bruce's wife. We have no idea who she is at all. We never do. It could be any of them. Selena, it's not Talia, that's for sure. But it could be anywhere from Selena, who was introduced by 1939, which is around the time they were married. Sorry about that again. Where was I? Oh yeah. We then transitioned to that concludes the first issue in 1949. Then we eventually jump to 1959, where a bunch of weird things are happening. As Bruce is still Batman. He's still Batman. As we have like a sentient house, and we have the Superman monster. So, in fact, this little bit popped up in Mark Waid's The Kingdom, the follow-up The Kingdom Come, hinting off that this was part of the new DC Hyper Time or another multiverse, which Byrne was not happy about. Then, by this point, Superman and Lois have had a daughter named Kara. And she's able to fly. Why? Because she wasn't exposed to the gold kryptonite. Meanwhile, Superman and Batman's dealing with Mixie. And Batman's dealing with Mixie. Superman's dealing with Batmite. And it turns out they were told by these aliens that, oh, we need the most powerful people. You two can help decide. Superman, Batman. Okay, we'll decide which one. So they can help fight their battles for them. And basically this eventually leads to, well, first, Lois gives Kara this red kryptonite amulet that she wore while she was pregnant with Kara and with Jonathan for a while. It was meant to avoid the whole man of steel, woman of Kleenex, which I actually like. Meanwhile, we see that Bruce Wayne Jr. has already been born and all that, and he's the current Robin, despite the fact that Bruce's mom does not care for that. Then eventually, as the things keep on intensifying more and more, thanks to the little imps that eventually leads to what looks like you think Superman and Batman are killed, causing Mixie and Batmite to argue, and then the aliens decide, we're going to take you to our planet, which is going to be way across the universe. So Superman and Batman never have to worry about them again. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor appears for Jonathan Kent, Joel Kent, sorry. That's their son, ready to talk with them. Meanwhile, then 10 more years later, we're around the Nixon administration. It's basically, they wish there's something they could do about it, but yeah, basically, government's getting involved. We have Alan Scott as Green Lantern, and yeah, by this point, Dick Grayson is now Batman. While Alfred, as long as it's passed down, we see Bruce talking with his ghost. And the later story, we find out that yes, indeed, Alfred is a legit ghost. It's not an hallucination. We then see Joker. They're trying to deal with this Joker Jr. guy, someone who's taken on for the Joker. And Joker's talking with him, laughing it off. They're like, unlike you, I never had time for offsprings. And basically we have it be that even, Joker, for one, he actually thinks Dick Grayson is Batman still. And we also see that it turned out Lois is dying from cancer. All those stickerettes like you saw last issue, and Kara's worried for her. And I love this. Kara's a natural blonde, but when she's Supergirl, she puts on a black wig. A nice reversal of the Linda Lee stuff from back in the old Supergirl days. And yeah, they fly off, and we see that Joel Kent is in Vietnam, and he's trying to make a name for himself away from the Kents, but he's just getting way too aggressive as troopers saying he's a liability. We cannot afford this. Meanwhile, we see that Bruce Wayne Jr. is ready to take over, but Dick is saying, no, let's not. It took me forever to convince people, even the Joker, to still think I'm really Bruce. But then while Dick is taking on one side, we see Bruce Wayne Jr. go over to where the Joker's at, and he finds all this makeup kit, stuff to make someone look younger, in a hidden compartment under his desk. Meanwhile, Dick goes into a building. All of a sudden, blades come out from this one little chute he's in, knocking him out as he meets up with Joker Jr. And basically, all those blades that cut into him had a bit of hallucination toxin that kicks in, as Dick thinks the pies are attacking him. As he's fighting them off, what he doesn't realize is guns are pointing right at him. Yeah, Dick gets killed. Jeez. Bruce Wayne Jr., as Robin runs in, realizes, Batman will die with him and Joker will win. It turns out, yeah, that was not Joker Jr. That was Joker posing as his own offspring, just to throw people off. But, as we find out earlier, Batman and Bruce Wayne Jr. decides to swap costumes. That would be, he didn't kill Batman, he killed Robin. So, yeah, Dick's dead. This is the first real major death in all of this, and one you don't see coming, but you're like, shit. And then they also find out that Joel was killed as well. Oh, his name was Joel Perry Kent, after Perry White. Then 10 years later afterwards, Kara and Bruce Wayne Jr. are about to tie the knot. You know what, I'm not that surprised, really. And Lois has gotten a bit worse, but the doctor they've had has been able to help him out. Also, Clark's been putting on makeup that allows him to look older. Keep up the posing and everything. And I do like that. Meanwhile, we see Batman, Bruce Wayne Jr., Batman, and Kara, Supergirl are fighting off Brainiac as they take him out. And I love this a little bit. Dad could do this with one hand without even working up a sweat. But I only have half his powers. Still, as Bruce has said once upon a time, half infinity and still infinity. Hold on a second. Sorry, forgot to close my door. But yeah, they take care of Lex, captures, she prevents her husband-to-be from getting taken out. We see that Jimmy's ready to retire. And Clark's in charge of everything. I like that. We see that Bruce Wayne went hunting for Ra's al Ghul, and at this point, we also see Ra's has something planned for Bruce with the Lazarus Pit. Then, again, more hiding on who Mrs. Wayne is. We then see what we think to be Lex Luthor in his armor talking with this Korean woman, or Vietnamese woman. And but earlier I loved it. Kara takes off her wig. We find out in the next book how that wig works. Then she and Bruce Wayne Jr. go up into the air kissing. And then when Mrs. Wayne shows up, Kara's costume falls. They join the Mile High Club. But anyway, at the time of the wedding then, and Kara looks beautiful, all of a sudden an armored figure shows up. Again, believed to be Lex. But then as and Kara takes off with him, we see and they blasted Clark with kryptonite, starting to reveal the masquerade. All of a sudden then a force field appears around Clark, Lois, and Lois's doctor, who is actually Lex Luthor. This whole time, using a pretty bad anagram, he did all this to keep Lois alive, so his plan come to fruition, so he could snap her neck right in front of him. Yeah, we're not done yet. But yeah, he murdered Lois. Then we find out Joel is the guy in the armor. And turns out, beforehand, Clark made it very clear to Joel, he could give him his son superpowers, but it would kill him to do it. But Lex has basically been like a second father to Joel, convincing him, your father lied to you. So because he was jealous of what you could do. And he loved your sister. So, and also the woman, Mei Ling, who, she was a Vietnamese woman who basically stayed and nursed him back to health, and then Lex found him. Everyone else thought that Joel had died. But then the two were fighting more and more. She's trying to talk sense to him, but he's so full of rage that he, without a second thought it seems, kills her. In this nice nod to Bullseye killing Elektra. Then Bruce Wayne Jr. finds up as Kara's wig falls right off of her. We later again find out that's a big indication that she's dead. Then, when he flies over to Lex, he starts to feel woozy. As turns out the procedure is killing him. And then with Lex, your father has never lied to you, boy, whereas I have always lied. Superman shows up, finds out his son's alive, just to find him dead. And then Superman tries to grab him, but Lex just fades away as a hologram. We then see that Mei Ling shows up. Turns out she had a son with Jonathan. And wait, was it Vietnamese or Korea? I gotta double check. Hold on. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. I should have double checked. I'm pretty sure it was either Korean or Vietnamese. I really should have double checked it all, but because I keep on reading up one thing or another, and yeah, I mean it's 69. That would be again, I'm not really sure on all this. I really should double check, but well, given how it's Nixon around, I think that would be Vietnam. Yeah, the Nam War. But anyway, she reveals that they had a son, so he has a grandson, but Clark doesn't know what to do, and that he probably wouldn't have powers either that could lead to everything going up again. But then Batman and Bruce Wayne Jr. decides, I'll raise him. And it's later revealed in back in Generation 2 again that he also marries Mei Ling to keep things appearances, and she would eventually help him out big time when things get darker. Anyway, 10 more years later, it appears that Superman's killed Lex Luthor. But let me just stick with 79. Think about this. 79 is when things started to get dark for DC, as we started leading into the 80s, in comics in general. That's basically what Byrne was going for. Things starting to get really dark. And then even more so in 89 when Superman seems to kill Lex. We then see that Hal Jordan is president. And they're about to go down and retrieve through all the security measures to retrieve a kryptonite ring that Superman gave to, he said, if you can't trust the president, who can you trust? And he gave it to Nixon. Even Clark, and Hal says, yeah, there's a bit of irony, but the ring's gone. We then cut to, turns out, Batman, Bruce Wayne Jr. Batman, who's wearing this very, very edgy outfit, flies off and goes to the Fortress of Solitude. He's mad that Superman did this. And then he destroys Jor-El and Laura's statues. But then he starts melting the other statues, and then he sees Kara. And that distracts him long enough for Superman to hit him, knocking his mask off at the two fight. But then we find out Superman, he doesn't have his powers anymore. At all. Turns out, though, when he eventually went to go confront Lex, he had, and Lex basically starts to taunt him, revealing that all those times he's been gone, every one of his loved ones, Jimmy, Lucy Lane, aka now Lucy Olsen, Perry White Jr., Lucy and Jimmy's kids, all killed off while Superman was trying to find Lex all this time, putting all of his senses to try and find him. Then Superman grabs him, but can't lift him, even though he's not as big as he used to be. Turns out, Lex had a gold kryptonite ring. Ring. And then he reveals, though, when he's like, what are you talking about, Lex? Oh, that. Let's get that aside. It's the Ultra Humanite. He put his brain inside Lex's body, but was stuck in that form. As he turns out, all of this was ready to apparently put his brain into Superman's body, saying, I will have all of your looks and all your powers. But just as he's starting, and turns out, why did Superman not find him? Turns out Lex, not long in a decade earlier, he literally used his own brilliance to jump 10 years forward. So he only appeared just a few days ago, enough to get things finalized and make sure that all of everything went according to plan. But then to try and stop Lex, Superman throws his metal chunk at Lex, and that fries him. If it wasn't for Superman's rubber boots, he would have been dead too. He's then met before a presidential committee, but when they're trying to say it looks like you were in self-defense, but Superman does not want to look at it that way. He feels like I could have done so much other stuff. I took an option that killed him, and so they decided to put him in the Phantom Zone. Yeah, again, that's pretty. Ugh. Okay, again, be right back. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. As I was saying, we're now getting into the last installment of the first part, and that would be in 1999. And as we're opening up with Head of the Demon with Talia, as Bruce Wayne Jr. confronts him. Bruce Wayne Jr. has been out in this in a long time, hasn't he? As we flash back to a couple of decades ago, as we find out what Ra's al Ghul was talking to Bruce about. Basically revealing that the usual stuff about how, you go through there but you come out mad, but it keeps on losing effects as time goes on. But here's a twist. If two people go through at the same time, one comes out altered, changed. And Ra's and Bruce go in, and of course if he doesn't, and Bruce backs out, Talia will shoot him. But yeah, they go in, and at first Ra's is all like, do you feel the pain, detective? Bruce shrugs off like, I've had worse facing the Joker. Ra's realizes then what's going wrong as he's trying to get out, but Bruce grabs him saying, you dealt this hand and I'm playing it. As they go through, then someone comes out, rescued, and it turns out it's Bruce. Yeah, Bruce had become the new head of the demon. But it turns out in the past few decades since then, he has actually been changing Ra's enterprise, trying to put more emphasis on their front of helping out, doing medical and other transports, and actually having that become the business done so slowly that no one realized it. They thought it was still a front when the front had become the business. Basically, the head had changed, and the body changed and took shape. But they had no idea. And why did he tell Bruce Wayne Jr. all this? Plain and simple. He wants to become Batman again. Now, if you look at this looks a little bit like the Batman animated style. Again, by the 90s, the late 90s. We then see that Batman decides to release Clark on good behavior, because it's not exactly been the full 10 years, it's a few months shy, but he decided, let him go. As he then lets him through, and then we meet up with Kent and Clark. That's Clark Wayne. That ends up being the son of Joel. As he then basically, Clark decides to start saying, a new person of the House of L. Wait, what? And Bruce is like, Clark? He doesn't know it all. He thinks that my son is his biological father. To which Bruce decides, let's end that charade. I played with some son, I realized something. Oh, and there's Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern. Not a fan of that costume at all. But, yeah, it turns out they looked through everything and basically Clark realized, wait, why did the Ultra Humanite say he would regain my body and my powers when he just took them away? And he said it twice, realizing he came up with a cure for gold kryptonite that won't kill a person. So yeah, Clark drinks it, finds out he has his powers back. He then uses what's left of it to make more of it and gives it to into his grandson, who, well, I should point out, it's Nightwing, obviously. And he drinks it, and he's able to gain his powers as Superman decides, I'm going to go out into space. There's so much more I need to know, and I have nothing else left for me on Earth. We then go to the last installment of this, and we jump to 2919, as Batman is now in the Bat Jet, I guess, and as he meets up with Superman, who has this long flowing hair. Turns out the way with how he's been is that with how the Lazarus Pit is done is basically Bruce now ages only 1 year every century. So yeah, it's been about over 1,000, well, less than 1,000 years, but so he's only gained about 10, 15 something odd years. And then we turns out we meet when the two first met up, truly met up. Not in 1939, but in 1929, when he was Superboy. Like I said, he's able to fly when back then he couldn't. Clark then later meets up with Lois, who's also just learning the ropes. And I think she looks pretty attractive at that young age. And basically, and I love how she's already been giving him, the lowdown and all that. She's not a reporter yet. But we see, oh no, she was giving Bruce the lowdown, sorry. And basically they soon deal with, ends up being the Lex, wait, was this Lex Luthor or, yeah, this is Lex Luthor that they're dealing with. And I love it how Bruce was the first Robin. I actually think that's kind of clever, actually. As, and as we're seeing, they're trying to deal with the giant mech and everything, and, Lois is able to help out and figure things out as well. And then we see the scientist that they were trying to meet up with, who claims that Lex worked for him when he really was Lex. He then takes off with Lois and has a bit of kryptonite to use, but eventually they were able to stop it, get him down, and capture, and they save Lois. And I love how this is Lois. She's just laying there on that box, and then gives Clark and Superboy a big kiss. Then it ends with basically Lana having a crazy magical adventure as Bruce and Clark's going off after him. Then we find out that Lana had gained immortality from all of those mixing the magics and everything. And turns out, yeah, she and Clark got together 3 centuries prior. And by this point, you can say, okay, it's time for him to move on. And this first one ends with them going out to get something and get into trouble. And this will be around the time of the Legion of Superheroes. So, that was Superman Batman Generations 1, and setting up the concept, it was good. Really sets up a lot of interesting ideas, and all that. But let's start getting into the second one as we be right back again. And continuing on anyway, Generation 3. So we start in, and continue on with this point. After such a huge success of Generations 2, it was decided to, put more focus on other characters than just Superman and Batman, like the rest of the DC universe. And so we open up in 1942 as World War II was still raging on. And we actually have stuff like Hawkman, as you saw, and you have the Spectre actually dealing with some giant mechs, and you have the Green Lantern. At this point, you had Wonder Woman ready to make her first debut. Now, to point out one thing interesting is that Byrne himself openly admits that because he didn't want to have to do another miniseries to explain Wonder Woman's opening, but she only appeared in 1943, he decided, I'll shift it around in 1 year and bring it in. Also, we have the Ultra Humanite show up, but since he's in Lex's body by this point, he's in a bit of a disguise and does the whole, look into my eyes, can't be the Ultra Humanite. And then we would see Lex again later on. Basically, he's playing it up a little bit, and I find it interesting. And you have, stuff with Robin and all that going on. And one thing I definitely like is at the very end, playing up something that actually did happen in a older story. Clark didn't make it into the military. Why? He got a little too eager, and he used his X-ray vision triggered, and he saw the chart in the next room, so he failed his eye exam. And this is the point still before they got married. And then in 1953, we had James Gordon show up. He had figured out who Batman was, and this is what leads Bruce into focusing on finding Ra's al Ghul. Turns out they're all part of the Justice Society. And around this point is when Diana is pregnant with Steve Trevor's child, and Lois is about ready to give birth to Kara. And I find that also very interesting. Superman's stuck on a planet, he's trying to get his way off, and he sends out a signal to a Green Lantern to get their attention, and he get them to Earth. Meanwhile, when Steve Trevor got into an accident and crashed, and at the same time, Diana goes into labor as well and delivers her child. And basically Steve dies, so she names her daughter, she goes Stevie is the nickname, but she names her Stevani. Yeah, Stevani, I believe it was. Also at the same time, we have Alan Scott meet the other Green Lantern, and it starts to set up a bit of a plot point of, wait a minute, how does their rings each work? But yeah, everyone's sad at Steve Trevor's death. And we then cut into Mrs. Wayne is not happy at all. That's the time we see her, but she's in makeup, so you don't know who it is still. She's not happy with Bruce Wayne Jr. becoming Robin, but Kara is overjoyed that she'll be able to be Supergirl. We also get to see a bit more with Joel, as Lex basically gave him a device that transports him so he can meet up with him and convince him. Then we also find out about how that freaking wig works. Turns out it connects into the bioelectrical aura everyone has, and basically if she pulls on it, not going to come off unless she either uses her gloves to push it off like we've seen her do, or she dies. Which explains why when she died in the prior one, her wig fell off, because she was dead. There was no more bioelectrical aura. And then we have Rob and Dick Grayson as Batman going around as Barbara Gordon is there. And I love this. She tackles him. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. What do you think's happy behind the couch? We then have a meet up with Kid Flash, dealing with the Weather Wizard, who seems a little on the younger side in his style, in Byrne style, but they're not. Also, Barbara's coming out of the shower. Gee, wonder why. Of course, we already know what's going to happen to Dick in a couple more years. Then we see Stevie becoming the new Wonder Girl. Even though Diana doesn't want her to, we see Gorilla Grodd. And basically, she helps out. They stop the Gorilla Grodd. And then it was Wally that comes up with the Justice Society of America. And then in 1975, we see the Joker is starting to go insane. Now, obviously, Dick has died by this point, and so is Bruce Wayne Jr. as Batman. And we see James Gordon's an old man. And, basically, Joker is something that's harassing and terrorizing Joker. So they realize they go to Dr. 13 for a little help. Then they have Deadman come help out. And basically have Deadman go absorb into the Joker and find out what's going on in there. And basically we find out Dick Grayson is haunting him. Dick Grayson, Robin, and Batman is haunting him, torturing him. Well, we see Carol Farrell's with Hal Jordan. Hal gets a bigger role eventually, but this is him deciding about running for politics. And then Deadman possesses Supergirl to tell him what's going on. Then we have Bruce go to Alfred and basically ask him for help one more time. As Alfred comes before Dick Grayson, calms him down, and they both move on. Alfred sacrifices himself for that. Turns out then the strain of all this starts to kill the Joker. And Bruce puts on the costume to come, to meet up with him, and he says, "Show me who you were. Let me die happy." And Batman leaves him to die, saying, "The last thing I want for you is to die happy." Then in 1986, which is after all the shit that happened, we then see one of the times Superman's trying to find Lex. It's being a hologram, of course, and he just tortures him again, re-showing him the deaths of his daughter at his son's hands. Continues to just taunt him. All the while then, Bruce Wayne Jr. is starting to become falling more darker and darker, and then Stevie is in charge of the Justice League with Alan Scott still, the Ring keeping him young, and they're in charge of the Justice League, and they're like, we have to deal with it. We also have a Carrie West, who is Wally's daughter. She's the current Kid Flash, and Bruce Wayne Jr., he is just becoming more and more the angry Batman. And then the League realized we gotta take him down. At the same time, we have the Hyena, someone who's trying to combine all Batman's villains into her regular tactics. Then we have, and right down to even having her crooks have henchmen or goon rented on her. And then Batman, Bruce Wayne Jr., he just kicks her ass. And then Stevie shows up and, first he takes out Alan Scott by covering him in wood. And then Stevie, she does the whole, if bound by a man, her powers are depleted. They fight, and then Alan Scott says something, and then that gets him just beating the hell out of him until Carrie stops him and he realizes what he's become. He goes back home, and like I said before, Mailing is there to comfort him as he's like, I don't even know what I am anymore. Then in 1997, 2 years before Superman be released, we then see Clark becoming and deciding to become, he's no longer Robin, that's when he decides to become Nightwing, with a K. And we then see Hal Jordan as he's being informed about stuff going on in space still with the Green Lanterns. And at the, we still see Kyle Rayner, still not a fan of that costume. We also have Blackhawk. But at the same time, we see this big attack going on as Nightwing tries to stop this giant mech smashing about. You think it's, hold on. Well, first we have to the point we also have Sinestro being dealt with as he then he's starting to overpower all the League, and Nightwing is still fighting him off. That is before he got all of those powers, so he's having to put up a good fight. And then when he this is Amanda Mason, the daughter of I can't remember his name, but Douglas Mason, and who's basically a robotic expert. And basically they stop him, put her away, and then Sinestro shows up. Kyle's been banged down. Shows up, starts to attack Alan Scott, and kills him. And or not yet anyway. And then Hal puts on the ring, and this is when then we have a big reveal. Turns out, Alan Scott's ring is a regular Green Lantern ring in this universe. And in this case, because the yellow impurity only existed because the Guardians told him. This is before Jeff Johns would reveal that. And that the wooden weakness for Alan Scott was something similar. As soon as he got the ring, he got caught by a wooden club, so he thought, I must have a weakness to wood. But because Hal realized, that doesn't make any much sense, because why is it that the wooden weakness existed until Kyle got the ring and then it became yellow? So he was able to overpower Sinestro, and then basically he's been able to unlock everything about it all. Then in 2008, we see someone in a brain wakes up as Metallo. As they escape and start stomping around. At the same time, Jay West, Wally's grandson, is ready to become the Flash. Meanwhile, Amanda comes out and turns out she and Clark have gotten close. Very close, to the point that she's finding out a person and they're ready to tie the knot. We then see Mrs. Wayne meets up with her boys, and her boys, meets up with Bruce first, then with her son, and she says we have something very important to talk about before our family separates for good. We then see Metallo, that's what he becomes, he's Metallo, as Clark shows up and starts fighting him, and it's made very clear it's Lex Luthor, his brain. The one that the Ultra Human had removed, turned out his robots evolved and decided soon to be able to, they were trying to cure him, but he became more insane. Also, we have Cyborg and Lady Blackhawk, and then Hal Jordan, no, wait, let me get to it. Hal Jordan shows up. He's now Green Lantern much later on. And they stop it, and then Clark and Amanda get married. Then in 2008, Clark and Bruce are called in to see, Superman at the fortress. And turns out he has something very important to show Bruce. He shows the first time that turns out Clark and Bruce met beforehand. Well before, not the first time of Superman and Batman, but even Superboy and Robin. Turned out there was a time before that. You had Superboy and dealing with the Ultra Humanite before he was in a wheelchair, and the Waynes get abducted, and then eventually at one point, then you have Bruce getting free, and he becomes the Flying Fox, which is a type of bat. Turns out, this is before his parents' death, but it shows that he still had that knack for everything. Paul Kent shows up, shoots the Ultra Humanite, that eventually leads to him being paralyzed. And then Paul Kent decides, I'm going to show the Waynes what's going to happen to them, because Bruce should not lose them. So he shows Thomas Wayne what's going to happen. Thomas Wayne is floored. But then he says, show me more about Bruce. And that's also when he then realizes, wait, he got that from my costume a year or so ago. And then he's realizing, if I take measures to prevent it, there won't be a Batman. And even Bruce was like, this can't be going where I think it's going. Then the Waynes die. And Clark Kent's like, wait, what happened? I warned him. And then, in one of the most brilliant moments I think Bruce and Byrne has ever come up with, Thomas and Martha tell Bruce how much they love him, and then they are ready to go to their death because they know doing so will encourage Bruce to become Batman and help the world. Wow. I mean, wow. I cannot think of, only in this Elseworld could that make sense, but it's just so heartbreaking. They knew. And yet they went and died anyway. They made him an orphan so that he could become Batman. Just, wow. Just so, yeah. And this really expanded on everything. In fact, if one was to take these apart and put them through an all the yearly interval instead, it still works. There's not any continuity gaps or whatnot. For now, let's get into one of the big ones. The 12th issue, Generation 3. Issue 1 is set in 1925, and basically Saturn Girl shows up right in front of Clark and his family, and at the same time, a small battalion of parademons are there attacking. And everyone's like, wait, what's going on here? And like I said before, we have Jarvis instead of Bruce because this is not a flashback, this is actually set in the past. And we see Lana laying there as Pa Kent's trying to brush her aside. Bruce goes and Bruce and Clark are both about to meet at the same time as Bruce and Clark is dealing with these parademons. Meanwhile, Ma is trying to help out Saturn Girl, but she's just banged up to hell. And then we see Lois Lane had showed up, snuck aboard with her dad, and is sneaking around until she and Lana meet up and bump into Saturn Girl's time bubble. And they both enter inside, and as Saturn Girl she's dying. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. As a bunch of military troops are ready to come in and figure out what's going on, as they're pulling up they want to take Saturn Girl. They think she's responsible for all of this. In a last ditch effort, well, first of all, they finish off this group of parademons. They are all gone. But then, with her last bit of life, Saturn Girl wipes everyone's memories of everything. And I love this. I have this weird feeling something has just slipped my mind. I sure hope it wasn't anything important. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Then, in the year 2025, we see Clark has two girls with Amanda. They are, hold on. Oh yeah, they're his granddaughters, and yeah, Supergirl Red and Supergirl Blue. And Amanda has been trying to help recuperate Lex, but Lex, he got away. As he's sneaking on through, we also have a hint off to onhe right there. And meanwhile, we have Superman and Bruce meet up again. As they go, and they have this inkling feeling as they go to Smallville, and they find buried underground a whole bunch of parademons in the past. Meanwhile, Lex is meeting up with a bunch of parademons in the current day, and something weird is going on New Genesis, as they are giving given a warning by the Source. Of course they do. And basically, the JLA, or they go to the JLA, just talk it out with them. As they're still trying, Clark and the others are still trying to find Lex, and the girl was hold on. Oh man, what are their names? Come on. Laura and of course, and Laura and Lois. Duh. As they are all in on the fighting against them, they and Lex, of course, exposes them to kryptonite. Basically, they go to Lex and to Superman went to Hal to ask, send me the New Genesis so I can talk to him about these parademons. And onhe shows up to help, but Lex takes him out. Superman shows up on New Genesis just as they are blocked away. They are basically sealed away. At the same time, then basically a weapon is about to go right off on everyone as a EMP goes off, basically shutting off everything on everyone. Then in 2125, again, these all go in centuries, we deal with basically Kamandi. As this we see what seems to be Kamandi swinging around, while Lex is still a bit of a threat. Turns out they knocked out power everywhere. We also see more parademons, a bit much larger than the last time, showing up. As we see Lois and Laura flying around, and Alana flying around, sorry. Wait a minute. Yeah, Lois and Lana, flying around, not Kara, Lana. And basically they've been stuck at the edge because they were caught point blank at the EMP. It somehow stunted their growth. Whereas with their father, it had, oh, come on. Oh yeah, it had accelerated his growth, and he decided to wear a proper Superman outfit because his grandfather is now missing on New Genesis, which they can't get to anymore. And basically, as things go on, they are still trying to figure out how to stop Lex, while also deal with this much bigger parademon force. Batman gets a hold of Kamandi, or who we think is Kamandi, until we see then eventually meet up with this old man who actually is Kamandi, and turns out who we think is his son is his daughter, Cam. No, but I'm not gonna wear this sissy thing. Dad, Cam, you're all right. Batman, well, today is really a day for surprises, isn't it? again, basically, you know what? I can go over each and every one of these issues, but I'll just sum some of these up. This one, Stevie gets killed and is sent to the Wonder Woman to try and convince her to come join up with them. And, well, it does. And again, and eventually you also have a OMAC army, but eventually the OMAC start to suffer a flaw. If one of them gets hurt or killed, they all feel it. And again, for some reason, the Parademon's forces keep getting larger. We have no idea why that is. And then, eventually, we find out that Bruce Wayne Jr. is mortally wounded in this one. Or he's at least starting to die. And we then finally find out what happened between Mrs. Wayne, Bruce, and Bruce Wayne Jr. all those years ago. And as he talked and led, pointed them towards meeting up, somewhere else. And yeah, then she meets up, reads a message that makes it seem like Bruce Wayne Jr. is not Bruce's son. And basically sends them on a big chase or a big mission that eventually, once they both, they needed Bruce Wayne Jr., but his time was starting to turn up. So he uses the Lazarus Pit to become younger so he can try and figure out what's going, what his mother wanted him to find out. And then, eventually, they go into this one room, and once they're there, after fighting a bunch of guys, then it turns out the message was it would only activate those two were there. And basically, yeah, and she's your son, and there you are, father and son. I just want to do it so you give a chance to be Robin. Use the Lazarus Pit even, so to make up for all the times where I kept saying no, he couldn't be your Robin. And yeah, and it says the house scanner would not have activated unless it registered both your bio traces. So, just how well do I know my boys? But then, eventually, Bruce Wayne Jr., he's dying again. But this time he chooses to pass on so he can finally be with Kara. And yeah, it ends on a very sad note. Then we come up to the 25th century, where Laura falls in love with this Green Lantern. But because she's still stuck in her body, we then have, and it basically becomes more and more apparent that, that he's not going to love her because he still thinks she's a kid. So eventually she needs to find gold kryptonite. We'll get to that. At the same time then, on New Apocalypse, Darkseid is resurrected. As, also again, as each one's been going on, that Parademon force keeps getting larger and larger. It's like, how is this happening? Then finally, Laura exposes herself to gold kryptonite. Lois exposes herself to gold kryptonite. No, Laura. I was right. Laura exposes herself to gold kryptonite. But then tragedy strikes when there's this big radiation-filled area as the Green Lantern she learned to Ator that she's starting to love is dying. If she had her powers, she could have saved him. But she didn't. So he dies, unable to be saved. And yeah, it ends very, again, tragically. Then we get to a two-parter set in the 26th century. Yeah, a bit of a cheat, but basically then it had to be, Superman is, hold on. I just gotta double check something. Right. Superman has finally been, and turns out he's made a life with beautiful Dreamer. Now he's had a wife, and her as a wife, because he's been there for so long, and they had 2 kids as well. And then, but finally he's able to leave, get to Earth, and meet up with, and we had to run in with Laura and Batman, who's all of a sudden now has Kryptonian level strength and flight. What the hell? But the only reason why he's able to prove himself is, points out, your parents willingly went to their death, which is, he never told anyone. And it's through this that we start to fill in some of the gaps between centuries that we never fully got. Such as Hal Jordan died when the EMP went out. Kind of a shitty way for him to go. And they reveal that, turns out Kamandi and Cam, while related to Buddy and Blink, it wasn't able to stop anything. So they had to go and dig up his all remains and then make the clone then. We had to find out that Bruce and Lois kind of got together. And then after the stuff with Ator, they, while she basically was able, that Laura kept on aging, eventually then he put, Lex did a big kryptonite bomb that killed off Lois and Clark. But because Laura was exposed to the gold kryptonite, she was perfectly fine. But then they decided to find the gold kryptonite antidote, drink it, but she had one condition. Bruce had to go through a similar thing. So they did the whole give a person kryptonite powers and Kryptonian powers, and because Bruce was an immortal, it actually worked on him. And then, well, basically that's how things have gone up to this point. They were finally able to stop Lex, deal with the parademons again, but then they decided they got to go back to Smallville, and that's where they find Saturn Girl's rotting corpse. Superman then takes off trying to go through time, as we then see Lois and Lana still going through the time bubble, catching up with them, for the first time in a while. Superman then ended up, not long after he left, Laura and Bruce are trying to figure out where'd he go, but all of a sudden they found a chamber, they find him there. Turns out, when he went back and tried to go back through time, he got bounced and sent back to, way in the past, only for him to eventually meet up with Scott-Free and Metron, but at a different point in their history. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. And the story eventually evolved. Pa Kent, Jonah Hex, and Martha. And at one point, I'll just put it this way, at one point, they deal with this one guy, and Martha gets shot. And this is why Martha can't have children. Then they're able to fix her up so she at least doesn't die. And then we also find out the big twist of Darkseid's plan. It's called the Helix. Basically, he keeps sending people forward and his troops, a big battalion of parademons, forward in time. And every time they do, they keep moving, they keep on starting to lose, they start to move forward again and again. But the thing is, it would not be feeling the effects of history until the beginning point. Meaning in 1925 was the beginning. And because of that, time is still moving forward for them, even though for the parademons, it's moving backwards. But the effect isn't felt until the end. I know, convoluted stuff, but when you really think about it, that's actually a brilliant plan, because they have time going forward has no idea, but time going back kind of do, even though they're more caught up with, wait a minute, and why is it now we're dealing with things being different? Then we get to the 27th century, and it's a big story, filling in some of the gaps, as this one old woman helps out a parademon, and basically explains how Darkseid and Orion had their big fight. They both killed each other, and then Darkseid was resurrected. We have the Helix thing going on, but we also find out these parademons, they actually have consciousness. They can actually think. They are actually sentient. But then the old woman realizes if they find out, they will stop holding back, and she kills them. And it's revealed to be Laura who did it. Thing is, though, this never comes back at all. It never bites them, but at the same time, though, in the 30th century, that's where Lois and Lana have shown up. Then in issue 10, we then see Darkseid is ready to make a big play, as he's come to New Genesis. Metron, and now we also find out that Lana and Bruce got together. Yeah. And it turned out they had a son, Thomas Taylor Wayne, who in between the years never became immortal, never gained powers, and he just eventually died of old age. We never get to see him, but it's interesting, as Lana's now starting to get the gray in her hair. But yeah, Metron crashes down, and Superman decides, I gotta use his mother box to go back. And turns out, New Genesis is destroyed, as Clark meets up with his son and daughter. And they make their way back to the city that's still standing. Meet up with Highfather, and Beautiful Dreamer is getting weakened. But then it eventually gets to a point where everyone starts to lose. Everyone is killed off until finally it's just Darkseid, Superman, his kids, and Beautiful Dreamer. He then kills off both Superman's new son and daughter, and then right at the last second, as he's ready to shoot him with the Omega beams, he kills Beautiful Dreamer. Superman just lost his family again, just like Lex did all those years ago, and Superman is tired of it. We then go to the 29th century, which is actually where Lois and Lana showed up. As they're going through, they see the Superman Museum, and everything. Lana finds out that Superman's Clark's gonna marry Lois, not her. And basically, it looks like things are starting to calm down. At least they have one city that's fine, as Superman, Lana, and Superman, Lana, and no, Laura. It is Laura, not Lana. Laura and Lois. Laura and Bruce have been fighting off the different parademons. They deal with that group before they got away. Then they meet up with Lois and Lana, realizing they have to go back. And once they do, they go back to 1925, where the bubble takes them. They find Saturn Girl, patch her up. And I love this bit because Mom and Pa Kent died in this continuity before they ever met Lois. So I love this. This is Lois Lane, your future daughter-in-law. I just love Lois is like, okay, yep, I get it. And before they're ready to go, Lana then simply asks for one request. Kiss me. Not on the cheek, but a real kiss. Why? Because she knows basically it's not fair. I now know it's never going to be. Why should I keep on going on fooling myself like this? And thus, Superman kisses her. Some people found this quickie. I find it kind of sweet. And then Saturn Girl fixes her mind and wipes everyone's mind still. They go into the time bubble because they realize that Darkseid's helix cannot allow anyone else to go through history. Except the bubble. Why? Because it moved before, she's still from the 30th century, and it still moved before the helix was first time activated. So thus, it gave them a thread line that could take them back to where it all started. So they decided to head over to the 30th century to try and stop this once and for all, leading us into the final issue. As Superman and the others help out, we meet up with a new Lantern. He's supposed to be like John Stewart, except his name is Jordan Kelly. And they meet up with Diana, who's still alive, helps them out. And then hold on. Laura, again, I can't believe we keep mixing them up. It's the L names. Laura goes in and fights as the helix is activated for the first time. Everyone else survives, but then Bruce finds Laura dying. They can't save her. But then she points out how we change it here. We start before it all begins. It's not going to happen, and we know it. This is basically a suicide run. As she dies. I am never forget what we have together. Bruce then buries his dog and buries his wife. Remember, they were married, and basically they decided to take the fight to Darkseid. And throughout all of this, Darkseid's ready to, because you still need the device on Apocalypse to keep it going. So they go in and start, eventually leads to like Batman fighting Granny Goodness. And then Granny, she killed Bruce with a big blast, but unfortunately it kills some of the power cables, plasma conduit that's causing a chain reaction. And then one of his men poisons Diana. They're going down like flies. Jordan Kelly got beat up by a bunch of the troops. He dies after taking him out. And then Superman shows up. Darkseid and Desaad is killed by the Omega beam, and Superman just keeps on beating on Darkseid because everything's about to blow. And then, it blows up. Boom. Then you remember how Generations 1 ended with Bruce, Clark, and Lana? Well, it opens up with them just meeting up. Bruce mentioning Laura having no idea what, and then just like the first issue, I'm not sure, Bruce. I have the strangest feeling something just slipped my mind. I hope it wasn't anything important, as everything's been undone. And, gotta be honest, that's a bit of a weak way to end everything. After all of that, yes, it was all undone, but it just feels like a bit more brush off. You know what I mean? Just like, yeah, don't know what's going on. I mean, I get it. It obviously was trying to get things back on track to where Generations 1 ended. And there was no other way to do that. But at the same time, it just feels a little like sweep it under the rug. Makes the whole thing feel a bit, well, pointless. I mean, granted, I'm one of those who defends the notion of even if it's not pointless, it's only pointless to the end result. But everything leading up to it still mattered, otherwise you wouldn't have had the reset button. So, that's Superman Batman Generations. But the first two really show how they were able to work within the continuities. And then the last one was a grand adventure across centuries. It was still also an interesting idea to make it a bit more of a regular series thing, but I'm a bit torn on it. Because again, I loved all the character stuff. But then it started to get more complicated for its own good, and then that ending just felt a little flat. But overall, though, it's still a great, epic way to end it all out. And yeah, is there any reason why people actually really appreciate this Elseworld? It is just pretty dang incredible, if you ask me. And, well, that's all I gotta say on this one. This is gonna be a long one because I had a lot to talk about, and you can tell how much I love this story. I'm not sure if all my story spotlights are going to be going every single issue, but in this case, I felt like I had to. So, that's it for today. Well, as always, no idea what I'm going to do tomorrow, so take care.